Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Grinding Gear Games have gone back to putting out daily teasers for patch 3.22. I believe that we've got everything we're going to get today. If it turns out that there's another one, then I'll make a separate video for it. The first thing they teased was trauma support. This is somewhat of a build your own Boneshatter skill. If you've ever wanted to have Boneshatter's specific scaling but on Flicker Strike, then this is the skill for you. That said, I don't think Flicker Strike is going to be the best use case for it. Flicker Strike loves multi-strike, and Boneshatter does not like multi-strike, and I expect that trauma support will not work very well with multi-strike. GGG put up a video that showed some gameplay involving both heavy strike and also double strike being used in conjunction with trauma support, but it doesn't really provide any meaningful information on how it works. The key thing that we don't know as yet is whether or not trauma support is going to cause a shockwave pulse the way that Boneshatter does when you stun an enemy. I believe from looking at the video the answer is no, but I can't say that absolutely certainly, even though I have watched this video slowed down to 25% a few times. Now, one thing that's important with Boneshatter adds a very large amount of physical damage to attacks, and then it has its backlash damage, which can be quite painful. And then it has a more multiplier to the amount of damage that you do with your attack based upon the number of stacks of the trauma debuff you have. If there is added attack physical damage on this gem, this is going to be something that will be incredibly powerful in conjunction with Facebreaker. But if there isn't flat added physical attack damage, then it's going to be quite hard for Grinding Gear Games to make leveling up trauma support seem like something you want to do. Again, if it has mechanics anything like Boneshatter, the backlash damage scales up really hard as you level that gem, and as a result, you need to have a big payoff for that to be worth it. Boneshatter does have that built in, but it's because it both increases the more damage multiplier it gives and also increases the flat damage. If it turns out that it does have flat added physical damage, Facebreaker is going to be completely ridiculous in conjunction with it. Facebreaker is the reason that steel rings are as bad as they are. It's the reason that abyss jewels that add physical damage to attacks are so bad compared to ones that add lightning damage to attacks or cold damage to attacks. And it's going to be really interesting to see whether it can be used effectively in conjunction with trauma support. All of that is going to come down to the numbers, but if it does turn out that Facebreaker is able to be used effectively in conjunction with trauma support, and that trauma support adds a huge chunk of flat physical damage onto any skill, then Infernal Blow looks like it's something you are going to want to play around with. The last thing to keep an eye out for on trauma support is what its alternate qualities are. Boneshatter has one of the most interesting and game-changing alternate qualities, and that is the Divergent quality. Divergent quality on Boneshatter causes the gem to go from having quadratic scaling, i.e. double dipping, with the number of trauma stacks that are on your character, to cubic scaling, aka triple dipping. That's because trauma stacks start increasing your attack speed as well. If there's something similar available on trauma support, that's going to be an entirely different build, and one that's definitely worth investigating as well. If you are looking to play around with trauma support, the best Ascendancy for it is likely to be the Juggernaut, assuming Juggernaut survives the patch notes. Second best is likely to be the Slayer because of its tremendous life recovery and moderate physical mitigation that it's got access to. And third is likely to be the Trickster, which has incredibly good energy shield recovery, but does not have the same access to physical mitigation as the Slayer does. You can also play it on other things though as well. People have certainly managed to play it on Pathfinders in the past quite effectively too. The second piece of news that we got today is one of those keystones that has a small number of people scratching their heads asking why would anyone use this, and then at the same time a small number of people saying that's exactly what I've been looking for. Unending Nightmare is probably not something you want to keep on your Atlas once your character is extremely powerful. If you're powerful enough to just smash your way through 100% Delirious maps, you probably want to do those and completely ignore that Unending Nightmare exists. However, most of the hours that are played in the game are not on characters that can do 100% Delirious maps with their eyes closed. What Unending Nightmare provides is a way to turn a Delirium mirror into more of a feel of a Delirium map, at the expense of losing the ability to find Simulacrum Splinters or Delirium Orbs in your maps. If you're running maps that have Delirium layers already applied to them, then Unending Nightmare is always a downside. You never want this allocated. If you're running maps and you have a high percentage chance of the Delirium mirror spawning, or if you're forcing it to spawn through the use of Sextants or other methods, then Unending Nightmare is going to provide you with a way to get your feet wet in Delirium content without being under the tremendous time pressure that the mirror normally provides. One thing that hasn't yet been clarified is whether you can cause the Delirium fog to manually dissipate. When you're playing a Delirium map and you set off the Delirium mirror, you might run around through the map and then decide, you know what, I'm starting to get overwhelmed at this point. I don't want to just wait until a Delirium mist dissipates. I want to dissipate it now and claim all the rewards from it now. You can do that without Unending Nightmare. It's not explicitly stated one way or the other whether you can do that here. Now, if it turns out that you can't do that with Unending Nightmare, then this is going to be a fairly bad keystone in many situations because you won't be able to get your Delirium layer rewards. And that's really going to sting if you'd worked up to 8 Scarab rewards and 6 Divination card rewards. However, if you can claim it, and I believe you probably can, but I'm not certain I'm right on that, then that's going to allow you to get those rewards once you've cleared the map, or once you've decided that you've bitten off more than you can chew. Where's the good use cases for this? I think there's a few. The first one is that you want to farm divination cards in maps that are just not very conducive to the Delirium Mirror. Here I'm talking layouts like Defiled Cathedral and Haunted Mansion in particular, where there's somewhat of a loop-the-loop setup and it's hard to get everywhere around the map. Delirium provides a boost to the number of monsters on the map and also a very large boost to the number of drops per monster that you get. As a result, a combination of Unending Nightmare and the Delirium Mirror is going to be extremely strong in those particular circumstances. If you are interested in this type of farming, I would recommend that you don't use Winged Divination Scarabs. You would save those instead for 100% Delirious maps, and you would be using Polished or Gilded Divination Scarabs while farming along this sort of lines. The second main use case is going to be for maps that drop already corrupted. There's a few sources of these, and the most common one is the Sextant that causes all of your map drops to be 8 mod corrupted maps. That's going to be really good in conjunction with Unending Nightmare, because sometimes those maps will have a Delirium mirror that spawns more than 50% of the time if you're using all of the Delirium support on the tree, and that's going to cause those to be a lot juicier than they otherwise would be. Another 2 major sources of corrupted maps you are going to want to run. The first one of those is Vaal Temple maps, however you source those. And the second one actually comes from Vaal Temple. When you're running Vaal Temple, you'll get a lot of copies of the Divination card, The Price of Protection, which will grant you an 8 mod corrupted rare Elder Guardian occupied map, which then is going to be perfect to run in conjunction with Unending Nightmare if you're tough enough to kill an Elder Guardian while it's heavily delirious and while it's got 8 map mods in play. If you are, then you'll find that you'll get a considerable amount of extra loot from doing that. Additionally, like a keystone on the Atlas should, it's going to change your valuation of a whole bunch of other Atlas passive tree support for the Delirium mechanic. For that reason alone, I'm particularly interested to experiment with this keystone, even if it ends up, as I expect, being something that you take early if you want to play around with Delirium early, and then you respec out of it once your character's more powerful. Also, you unspec it if you are running a Delirium strategy on a map like Tropical Island that is perfect for Delirium once your character is powerful enough that you can get the boss dead 12-15 seconds before the Delirium mist dissipates. Until that point, Unending Nightmare has some definite strengths, some definite weaknesses, and that's exactly what you want to see in a keystone. That is what's been teased today. I'm going to leave it there. May your Vaal Orbs have interesting results, and I will see you around.